It's time. Assaulting the narrative. Destroying the lie.
John Gordon.
Unearthing the truth.
You can't handle the truth. The truth.
Live from West Palm Beach, Florida. Heard coast to coast and all around the world.
John Gordon.
High Noon with John Gordon.
Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm John Gordon. We're going to tell you the truth today. We've got a lot to talk about. We're going to start with our Biden lawfare continuing around the country. I also want to make you aware that we have Harry Horry, the chairman of United Sovereign America, coming on today in the second segment as our guest. He is an elections expert. He's a cybersecurity expert. He's going to talk about 2020, but more importantly, how do we secure 2024? Ladies and gentlemen, it's my biggest worry. It's my biggest concern because Trump is kicking ass. There is no other way to say it. It's 80 degrees in West Palm Beach today and beautiful sunny skies. It's going to get up to a summer-like day before it's all said and done. But as I mentioned, Biden's lawfare continues. Alvin Bragg began calling witnesses in his fake prosecution this week in Manhattan. In the Stormy Daniels case, Alvin Bragg is prosecuting former President Donald Trump, the first U.S. president, past, current, or former. I didn't say that right. Past or present in a criminal prosecution. It would be laughable if it weren't so disgusting, because the case itself is laughable. You understand that Trump is being criminally prosecuted because he did not list the payment that he made to Michael Cohen to reimburse the payment that Michael Cohen allegedly made to Stormy Daniels, and I'm sure that he did. He didn't label it as hush money or a non-disclosure. Instead, he labeled it as legal expense. That's the whole case. Well, guess what? The statute of limitations has run on that case. Guess what else? The federal prosecutors looked at it and said, nothing here. We're not prosecuting it. And then the Federal Elections Commission looked at it, and what did they say? Nothing here. We're not touching it. So now Bragg claims that there is another felony that actually allows him to prosecute the case and solves the statute of limitations problem. Except there's one little problem with that. He hasn't told Trump's lawyers, or anyone else what that alleged felony is. How is Trump supposed to defend himself if he doesn't know what the charges are? And where is the indictment for this alleged felony? Folks, it just reeks. It reeks of lawfare, and it is being unquestionably orchestrated by the Biden White House. We can get into that more in depth in on another show, but I just don't get it. I don't get what these people are thinking, and what is the precedent that they are establishing if and when, and I hope he does, Donald Trump gets elected president? What if the Republicans go to the lengths that the Democrats have against the Democrat lawbreakers? I mean, they have not been able to pin anything on Trump. They're all made up charges for the most part. For the most part, they're made up. They're just made up. And they have absolutely nothing, and they have not been able to pin anything on Trump. But what about the people who invented the Steele dossier, which led to the Mueller investigation, which led to wasting $30 million of taxpayer money that exonerated Donald Trump? What about the people that invented that? That would be Hillary Clinton. I wonder if the statute of limitations has stopped on that. I wonder if there is an underlying felony that might allow a prosecutor in, say a year from now, looking into Hillary Clinton's destruction of documents, electronic documents, text, emails that were destroyed while under a court order to preserve. I wonder if the statute of limitations can be dealt with in that case. And then what about when the Republicans reclaim the White House and hopefully the Congress? What about we do a deeper dive into Hunter Biden and Joe Biden? I mean, have these evil people considered the stage that they're setting for what could happen a year from now? I mean, I think that just shows how stupid they are, because they're begging for it. I mean, Trump showed great restraint. You know that famous clip that Hillary Clinton in the debate said that, thank God, Donald Trump wasn't going to be president because he lacked the temperament to enforce our nation's laws. And he retorted, yes, because you would be in jail. Hillary Clinton was easy pickings if he wanted to go after her after the election. And she was so nasty. Excuse me, I've got this cough that won't go away. But don't worry, it's not contagious over the airwaves. It's just an annoyance. But the incompetence that they're showing is that they're not able to look 2 moves down on the chessboard if Donald Trump gets reelected and we clean the swamp. And we put people in that really care about the law. And we'll go prosecute these people who are violating the law for political purposes. Good gosh, what havoc are they inviting into their lives? Last week, I suggested that these trumped up charges and this lawfare could really backfire on the Dems. And we're seeing it played out. I suggested last week that Trump could really take advantage of this. But instead of going back to the Trump Plaza and going to bed, because you know he's probably exhausted, if he could go make campaign appearances, if he could go hold meetings and fundraisers with people in New York, maybe there would be a slim chance that he could take New York. Now, that's a stretch. New York is a classic Democratic state. But get this. In 2020, Biden beat Trump in New York by 23 points. In a poll that just came out this week, Trump has cut that lead in less than half. He is now only 10 points behind Biden in New York, and the momentum is with Trump. I mean, it's unbelievable. And Trump, look, I know Trump figured this out. He doesn't listen to the Truth with John Gordon, even though he should. Maybe somebody on his staff does. I don't know. But I'm not delusional enough to think that I'm directing the President of the United States. But great minds, Trump is doing exactly what I suggested that he should do. I'm not the only one. A lot of people have said it. But he is holding campaign appearances on the streets of New York. Just this week, he went and met with union leaders in Midtown New York. Just for our, by the way, you can watch us on YouTube Live right now. You can also watch us on Getter Live, and you can also watch us on Rumble Live. So if you're on the streaming service, you'll see the video. Otherwise, if you're on the John Fredericks Radio Network in Atlanta, Nashville, Richmond, Norfolk, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and the entire state of West Virginia, you can get the audio. But listen to what happened on the streets of New York just 3 days ago. Clip one.
We love Trump! We love Trump! We love Trump! We love Trump! We love
But the long and the short of it is that there were hundreds of people on the streets, and these were blue-collar workers. And when Trump arrived, they started chanting, USA, USA. And when he got out of the car, hundreds of people, blue-collar workers, started chanting, Trump, 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 Trump. And then, we love Trump. We love Trump. I'm telling you, folks, New York is in play. It really could be a determining factor in the outcome of this year's election. What sweet poetic justice would that be? All we can do is pray, work, do what we can to help. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling encouraged by it. Trump has said that he might hold a rally in New York. To me, the choice of venue is between Madison Square Garden and Yankee Stadium. Madison Square Garden holds just under 20,000 people. Do you know that there are 40,000 New York cops and 10,000 New York firemen? Just the law enforcement and first responders could fill Madison Square Garden, and they probably will. Yankee Stadium holds just under 50,000. And guess where Yankee Stadium is? The South Bronx. I'm excited. I am so fired up, ladies and gentlemen, because I have wanted truth. I've wanted virtue. I've wanted goodness to triumph over evil. And for the first time in quite some time, I have really I'm feeling the most enthusiastic that I have been. I can just sense it, that the momentum is definitely swinging towards Trump. And the 6 out of 7 swing states have shifted for Trump, including Georgia, where he is ahead 10 points. Wisconsin, he's ahead a little bit, not a whole lot. But we're still 7 months away from the election. That's a lot of time. And there's time for the Democrats to pull their stuff, which I have no doubt that they're going to do. I don't know what it's going to be. But look, the Fonnie Willis case is all but over. Have you heard anything? Crickets. And the Letitia James case is on appeal. The Court of Appeals in New York has demonstrated that they are willing to follow the law. Not Judge Engoron, not Judge Ignoramus, but the Court of Appeals has shown that they're willing to follow the law. There's no way that verdict stands. There is no way that verdict stands if they are going to follow the law. And the Jack Smith case, you know, the one about Trump taking classified documents, but Biden had twice as many and he had no right to them. At least Trump was covered under the Presidential Documents Act. He had the authority to declassify the documents. I think a very strong argument could be made that Trump may not have stroked the pen to declassify the documents, but just by the very act of taking the documents with him seemed to me to be de facto declassification of the documents. I haven't heard anybody make that argument, but I think it's a pretty good one. I don't know why they wouldn't, but I don't think it's going to get to that, because if you followed the Supreme Court this week, it is clear that all the justices of the Supreme Court believe that there is immunity for a president. Now, the question is how they slice it and dice it. The argument breaks down based on whether the conduct was an official act or whether it was a personal act that was designed for some personal gain. So if the President of the United States is meeting with the citizens of the United States on the obelisk in Washington, D.C., with the White House in the background and the American flags flying, and he's talking about the legitimacy of an election, how can you deny that? How can you not look at that as an official act? Otherwise, every time the president would address the nation, he would have to be worried about whether he could be prosecuted in some way because somebody doesn't like what he's saying. I think it's a very slippery slope, and so do the justices of the Supreme Court. I listened to the oral arguments last week. Of course, there are liberals on the Supreme Court that want to trim the edges. They want to slice it at the edges so that maybe they can cling to this false hope that Trump could be convicted. But I don't think so. My sense is, but here is the real point. Forget all that. Just turn on the windshield wiper, clean the screen, forget everything I said. The fact of the matter is, I do predict, and I believe strongly that the Supreme Court is going to remand this case to the Washington, D.C. Federal District Court. Well, the Supreme Court isn't going to rule until the end of June. Then it goes to the district court. You know that the wheels of justice, except when it's going after Trump, grind very slowly. So it gets remanded to the district court. They have an evidentiary hearing to determine whether Trump's conduct was for personal gain. I don't see how you can argue that being president of the United States is for personal gain unless you're Joe Biden and have taken $30 million from our adversaries. So, but that would mean that anything that someone did of even campaigning for president could be subject to prosecution. If you say that winning the presidency is a personal gain, I think it's a personal sacrifice. I think most people would agree with that. So I think that that's official work. I think that is cannot be characterized as for personal gain. Ergo, these cases all go away. Trump's got immunity, and the fact is that the timing. All we have to do is get past November the 5th, and for Trump to win. And these cases go away because it's not the underlying criminal charges that are motivating these people to bring these cases. Forget that. Do you think they really care about whether the money was paid to Stormy Daniels and was classified as a legal expense versus hush money? I mean, I don't think anybody really doubts that Trump paid Stormy Daniels. Big deal, okay? Some people can care about it. Fine, care about it. I don't. Do I condone it? No. Do I think it's relevant to the current day conversation? Absolutely not. It's a distraction. Just look at policy. Look at China. Look at the border. Look at inflation. That's what we need to be talking about. Biden can't talk about those things because if he does, he loses. He has been a disaster of disasters. The worst president I have ever seen or read about. You know, he finished at the very bottom of his class in law school while lying to people and saying that he got in on a scholarship and that he was at the top of his class. It's just a lie. So many of the things that he says are just lies. And so I don't know where to place it on the continuum. I don't think people that want to talk about his age, look, I'm old, I'm 71. Come play tennis with me. I'll kick your butt. I can play tennis for 2-3 hours at a stretch. Come on down. Let's go. Age is not the issue. Now, his mental competence and his whether he's senile or whether he's got dementia, those are legitimate, and clearly those are a reflection of age. But Trump is sharp as a tack. Biden's not. But I think it's worse than that. I don't worry so much about Biden's mental acuity as I do his mental integrity. I don't think he's a good person. I derive no pleasure from saying that. I have supported every president of the United States in my entire life. I put a bumper sticker on for Richard Nixon in 1960, and I supported John Kennedy as a 10-year-old because I felt in my heart that it was the right thing to do. Even as a kid, I was patriotic and I cared about our country, and I supported and I believed in our leader. I didn't like Lyndon Johnson, but I supported what he was. I gave him props for making the sacrifice to be president and taking all the hits that he did. Just go all through the list. Jimmy Carter, horrible president, great man. So I'm just saying, we get all these cases delayed, and you know they're running out the clock. Basically, is the way I see this. Trump and his lawyers are just running out the clock, and when we get to November the 5th, we're past the 2-minute warning. The game is over. God help us. God, please let Trump get reelected, and we can get this country back on the right track, and a foundation based on the Constitution, the rule of law, and our values. So that's what I believe is going to happen. I think the Supreme Court is going to remand this case to the D.C. District Court. They're going to say, hold an evidentiary hearing. That's going to take a long, long time. And then there is another appeal that's probably going to go back up to the Supreme Court. We're well past November. These cases go away. Donald Trump is president. Tulsi Gabbard is vice president. And Hunter and Jim Biden are pardoned in the last remaining days of the Biden presidency. Let's go ahead and roll into clip 3 there, Q.
New York, I understand, and we're leading in the country by a lot. Poll just came out a little while ago, as you saw yesterday, that we're up in every swing state and up by a lot in every swing state. So I think we're going to do very well, and we're going to make a play for New York. They said, I just heard there was a very good poll came out. Normally, a Democrat will win New York. Biden is the worst president in history, and we have some very bad people here, but we have the greatest people, and they're right behind me.
All right, so I want this last clip. Can we go to straight to clip 5, Q? We're going to pull up clip 5. Give Q just a second here to get it going. But this guy, he's a construction worker. If you're not watching on the live stream, I would guess that he's maybe 6'2", 220 pounds. He looks fit as a fiddle, and a New York tough guy, construction worker, tool belt around his waist and a hard hat on. Listen to how he summed it up.
What's it like seeing so many Republicans in Manhattan, so many Trump supporters in Manhattan? Does that surprise you?
No, not at all. It's turning now. Trump's turn again.
What's your message to Joe Biden?
You.
I'm telling you, this is a great day for America. And I've said since the beginning, even in my most pessimistic days, that I believe that good would triumph over evil. And by gosh, ladies and gentlemen, we're watching it unfold before our very eyes. Today's broadcast is brought to you by First Liberty of Georgia. Like yourself, like so many of our listeners who are entrepreneurs, I require a high level of trust and a high level of competence when I deal with somebody and the stakes are high. Well, I've known the owners of First Liberty, Georgia since 1972. Brant Frost and I went to high school together down there in Macon, Georgia. That's over 50 years, and I know his family, including Brant the father and Brant the son. And I know many of our entrepreneur listeners are on the MAGA side and own their businesses and run businesses, small, medium, and large. And have you been to the bank lately? If you own or manage a business. Maybe you want to grow your inventory. Maybe you want to expand into a new territory. Maybe you want to build a new building or refurbish an old one. If you've gone to the bank lately, you know it is a hassle of hassles. But if you need between $250,000 and $10 million, go to FirstLibertyGA.com. FirstLibertyGA.com. They are my friends, Brant the fifth, Brant the fourth. They're in Noonan, Georgia, but they serve all 50 states, and they are backed by the Small Business Administration. They've been in business since 1990. They're MAGA, they're Trump, they're the real deal. In just 10 minutes, you can get qualified by phone. Don't let the bank stand in the way of your dreams. If you want to grow your business, now's the time. FirstLibertyGA.com. That's who you can go to for financing. Go to FirstLibertyGA.com. Check these guys out in just 10 minutes. They'll pre-qualify you for between $250 and $10 million. They're the real deal. They're there for you, and you won't get a ream of paperwork like you do at the banks. Forget that. They're Christians. They're strong conservatives. They're strong MAGA. And I personally like to support the patriot economy. Now, folks, I have given you a lot of optimism today, finally. I really think the sun is beginning to shine through. We'll see. There are going to be a lot of twists and turns and bumps along the road. But it all hinges on our ability to have honest, free, fair elections. That's my number one concern. Can we get an honest, free, fair election? Well, here is Harry Hari, the chairman of United Sovereign America. He is an elections and cyber intelligence expert, and he's been working on elections integrity at least since 2020 and maybe before. Harry, welcome to The Truth.
Thank you for having me, John.
Well, I appreciate you coming on such short notice, and welcome to South Florida. Where is home for you, by the way?
Home is in Missouri, St. Louis to be exact.
Very good. I like Midwest.
I don't spend enough time there, unfortunately.
Well, I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate the sacrifices that you are making personally for our country. You are exemplifying what I've encouraged all of us to do, which is to figure out where we can make a difference, pick out a lane and go get in it and work like hell to try and save our country. And you've done it. So tell us about your work did it begin in 2020?
That's fine. Whenever you want me to start.
Well, no, I'm just saying, did your work on elections integrity, was it an outgrowth of the 2020 election, or were you like Garland Favorito, who's a friend of ours and a frequent visitor on our show? He's been at it since 2014 in voter GA in Georgia. So when did you start your mission?
So in terms of current condition, it's 2020. I get called in by a group that were, concerned about what was shaping up to be the 2020 election. So I joined many others in Washington, D.C. a few days after the election in 2020. I started, there were a group of different litigators, Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani were, part of that focus, but Phil Klein's Amistad Project, they were all based in the Westin Hotel, starting actually around the time of the election. So based on some of my statistics and mathematical experience, everybody was trying to figure out what had gone on. I'd been a person that had spent most of my life dealing with mathematical patterns, so it was something that was natural for me is to join the effort. And so basically I came in, and they didn't know I was also an election expert, but for a variety of reasons, and this is back from a long time ago in my youth, I'm involved with St. Louis County elections in Missouri. The people that end up being the primary authors of HAVA are John Ashcroft, former governor and senator from Missouri, and a fellow that's become somewhat infamous in later years, but starts out as election commissioner, the commissioner of elections in St. Louis County. I help him rewrite the policy and procedures in St. Louis County. I'm an entrepreneur at this time. Around 2000, I become involved in the Bush v. Gore controversy as a consultant. So basically, from that point, I become a advisor on writing HAVA, particularly the initial fabric of the voter guidelines and some of HAVA itself. So a lot of what becomes HAVA is written around the process that banks use to deal with the integrity of their item processing systems. I'm one of the leading vendors in that space at that time on image-based check images. I can get into that whole background, but basically I'm helping them decide what needs to be done to maintain the integrity of the vote. That becomes HAVA and the original voter system guidelines, from which all the rest of the current mess with regard to machines evolves.
Thomas, if I could, I don't mean to interrupt you, but let's get to Peter Rabbit here. What did you conclude happened in 2020? I don't know whether you need to want to break it down by the swing states. I know you. I understand you just testified in the Jeff Clark D.C. bar hearing, where they're trying to take away Jeff Clark's bar license for a letter that he drafted but never published. I mean, the things that are happening to people that are good people that have served our country. And
the argument that there's no specific evidence of election fraud or no overwhelming evidence of election fraud is itself a fraud.
Well, I call that the biggest lie.
The biggest lie at the beginning
I call that the biggest lie.
Yeah, so most of my testimony for the Amistad Project focuses on the machines. It isn't actually what United Sovereign Americans is doing. From our perspective, if you look at the election system, it's totally broken. You can't prove anything. You can't prove who won. You can't audit it because they've destroyed the auditability of the system. These failures exist everywhere. The law actually requires the maintenance of all auditable items for 22 months after the election. Yet in elections everywhere, they've destroyed the evidence. They've destroyed chain of custody ballots, or on the ballots. They've never even required chain of custody to be maintained on millions and millions of ballots, which is the law. So what I hesitate to do when I have these conversations is say that President Trump won the election. What I like to start with is there's no credible proof that President Biden won the election. So the fact of the matter is that the evidence is overwhelming that certification itself was illegitimate. And the reason for this is that they didn't bother to obey the law anywhere. You've got hundreds of thousands of ballots that are supposed to have signature validation in Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Arizona, and it takes years, unfortunately, through adverse proceedings to find this out. But everybody knew it, but they knew it not from an evidentiary perspective, but a knowledge of the conduct of the election. So how do they stop us from making these arguments? They block us at every point from exercising our rights. One of our clear rights in transparent elections is to be able to see the proof that the election was conducted according to law. And there's ample proof that it was not conducted according to law. And if you look at it, the attack on the integrity of elections or the validity of elections is everywhere. You don't have people proving that voters are eligible. I mean, the states are attacking eligibility requirements, whereas the Constitution requires you to be eligible and a citizen. It's one of the few things that is specified in the Constitution, and yet we think that a bank statement or a renter statement is sufficient to prove that you're a legal voter. And the fact that I self-attest, I mean, every federal system that requires citizenship except voting requires proof of citizenship. When you get a passport, you have to prove that you're a citizen of the United States. It's complete nonsense that we've allowed the whole system to be debrided to the point that it has been.
Well,
we have this issue. I mean, you start with the vote. You know, the voters and then you go to the process of figuring out whether the votes are being counted properly or not, and then you go all the way down, the tabulation processes. The machines don't comply with federal law. That's provable. And then they say, well, EAC gave us a waiver. There's no authority under the law for the EAC to issue waivers on certification. It's, there's not a process there. It's not an administrative process. The Federal Information Security Modernization Act requires certain processes to occur on critical national infrastructure. And as of 2022, none of that work had been done anywhere. So in 2020, you can argue back and forth whether or not it met the standards, but the essential argument is the federal government's had standards for security of processes for a long time, and they simply are not being followed. And so that the issue that you've got to deal with is simply, did we have a fair, honest, open election in 2020 and 2022?
No.
Actually, probably extending all the way back to 2008. Maybe even further back than that. And the fact is, we aren't. We're allowing the states and special interests within the states, to consistently attack the integrity of the system. And most people don't understand. I mean, the Constitution itself is a treaty between the people. It's decided we can form a more perfect union of people with diverse opinions by having the rule of law. But then there are interest groups that attack this rule of law consistently, and I call it the attack of the piranha. The special interest groups, attack this specific issue, that specific issue. But at the end of the day, the question is, did only eligible voters vote, and did every vote of eligible voters get counted? And it's completely provable that is not the case. There's no state in the union that is making a credible effort to accurately determine if you're eligible. Some are much worse than others. We have flagrant issues in Pennsylvania and New York and Illinois and California, but even areas of Texas and Florida have problems. And then you've got all the nonsense with executive override. There's nothing in the law that says a state executive can override or change the law. And there's also nothing in the law that says the DOJ can simply decide not to investigate thousands and thousands and thousands of reported issues of election misconduct in 2020 and 2022. Yet they did it, and at least so far they've gotten away with it. Our purpose at United Sovereign Americans is to make sure that it's stopped.
Exactly. So I heard you say that you weren't really telling people that 2020 was that Trump won, but I would tell you that in Georgia, I know Trump won because I've seen the evidence. The amount of fraud and the amount of illegality is overwhelming. But it doesn't really matter for 2020. That ship has sailed. But the point that you just made is exactly the point that we should be focusing on, and that is, how do we prevent it from recurring? And I want to talk about that. But before we get to that, I want to ask you, our guest, Harry Howery, who is chair of United Sovereign America, who are they? I mean, to orchestrate this, you've got to have some very powerful people. I do believe it's orchestrated. I have pondered a lot about how do you carry something out like this out? And the simple answer is with money. You got George Soros, who's given hundreds of millions. You got Mark Zuckerberg, who gave $400 million. But how do you get the complicity of all these elections officials to go along with it? And why is Brad Raffensperger, was a conservative Republican? I mean, I had a member of the Georgia General Assembly tell me who served with Raffensperger, that he was one of the most conservative members of the legislature. And I believe, I have no doubt in my mind that he's a serial liar. I think he sold us down the river. Why? And to what end? And why won't he speak the truth?
So the why, so I have extensive experience with military and geopolitical intelligence. The issue simply is it is what does the data represent, and do we need to investigate and figure out who did this? I absolutely agree that we do, but if we continue, down into the weeds of deciding who the enemy is, if you will, we fail to focus on the fact that we have to have strong, transparent, honest elections. And until we return the integrity to that basic system of adjudicating the intent of the voter, we don't have anything. I mean, even Hugo Black, one of the first progressives on the Supreme Court of the United States, says that without honest elections, the grand right of suffrage is impeded, and you have no rights at all if you have no ability to affect the elected officials that are in the system. So the basic long and the short of it is this: that the evidence is everywhere that there are orchestrated efforts. Some of those efforts, at least apparently to some people, would suggest that they're in competition with each other, right? That the best example would be the French or the Russian revolutions, where initially all they're all focused on is to get rid of the existing leadership. Once they get rid of the existing leadership, all hell breaks loose, because now the factions are in competition with each other. So what we have is a system driven by money and the corruption that's caused by this. We have a system that's supposed to be representative of the people, but we've allowed much of the power in the system to be under the control of parties. And then the parties themselves can be corrupted by the process of how the party officials are nominated and elected. So I'm not saying that the Republican Party is as corrupt as the Democrats, but I'm saying that the system itself is built so that it's extremely difficult for the electorate to be heard. And that's not the purpose of the Constitution. The purpose of the Constitution was to make sure that the individual rights of the American citizen, the sovereign, if you will, of the country, that their intent was heard. So who's doing it? I mean, you have billionaires and multi-billionaires that are trying to influence the process. Some of them are coordinated, obviously. Some of them are not. Some of those coordinations are opportunistic. Some of them are planned. But to tell you the truth, this is our biggest problem. Our biggest problem is if we focus on the guilty parties, we spend 5, 10, 15 years adjudicating investigations. We don't have 5 or 10 years. We have less than a year to get this fixed.
Well,
if we do this,
I'm willing to
we've
personally.
done in 2020 and 2022, again in 2024. Right. Are we going to even survive as a country?
Well, I think you make a good point. I'm willing to suspend my focus on who it is, although I would like to identify them so we can watch them very carefully and hopefully put enough light on them that they will have second thoughts about what they're doing. But clearly, how do we...
perfect example is the money laundering activity inside of, what is it, Act Red, or I can't remember the titles, but you have these small donor organizations that are funding thousands, tens of thousands of small money donations from just a few people. And how did that system get set up? Is it in compliance with our federal election laws? I don't think so.
Well, how do we get an honest, fair election in November? What are you doing, and where do you think we're vulnerable? How do we fix it? Is there time?
There is time. Our strategy is simple. We're going after the states. We've created what we call scorecards. We have many states done already. We are going to file TROs. This process is already underway. We started our first lawsuit in conjunction with another integrity group in Maryland. We are getting ready to file a number of other lawsuits. Our purpose is to make sure that the basic integrity of the system at a constitutional level is maintained. And the duty to prove that elections measure the intent of the voter is their duty. It's not ours. We can show statistically, and people say, well, statistics aren't evidence. It's a load of nonsense. The fact is the entire fabric of our EEOC laws is based on statistics. The real problem is that people haven't done the work to do valid statistical analysis that holds up in court because we didn't have time in 2020. We didn't know this mess was going to be created. We arguably had time in 2022. By the way, I've worked with Garland and his people, and they've done a lot of great work in Georgia. There's several other integrity groups in Georgia that have done great work. But the fact of the matter is, we have to have provably fair elections, which can only emanate from ones that are conducted lawfully if the laws are constitutionally valid. So you have the first issue that emanates from who gets to vote. The fact is they have to be eligible to vote and they have to be U.S. citizens. So systems that don't prove that need to be challenged. And then you have an entire process for...
How do you challenge when there are 10 to 15 million illegals in our country and the people that are supposed to be the gatekeepers are presumably, some of them, going to allow them to vote if they just show up?
So this is an interesting issue. I just broke out of a meeting that was talking about this specific issue, but it's called the fruit of the poison tree, right? These people are allowing people to vote that are not eligible to vote. There's a provision in the 14th Amendment that allows you to challenge the validity and the representation of states that don't enforce the U.S. Constitution. It originates, of course, at the time of the actual insurrection that occurs in the 1800s with the Civil War. But the real issue is that these people don't have a right to corrupt the election system and then claim that they have the ability to determine who voted according to the U.S. Constitution. And the same issue, I mean, there are thousands of problems with our election system. I'm not sure that the right issue isn't to have, tamper-proof ballots that are printed in a controlled fashion and purple thumbprints on all of the ballots. The current system is so corrupted that nobody knows who voted.
I agree.
Give you an example. In 2020, in 2020, in New York, they approved the vote, and the voter rolls show a 338,000 person deficit between those that were reported to vote and the vote. How can you approve an election that has, a 338,000 person variance? In Pennsylvania, they allow 160 some odd thousand ballots in that don't have signature verification. Up until just a few weeks ago, the state of Georgia doesn't admit that they didn't do any of the legal validation that was required in 2020 on the election. So all of those ballots that were accepted into the system were illegal ballots as defined by the law. That's the law, black letter, already determined law. But they're forcing us through court instead of allowing us to have fair elections. And unfortunately, court, the reason we have HAVA to begin with was to put a process and set of procedures in place that got us a valid election intentfully instead of fighting it in court. I mean, it took 45 days for Bush v. Gore to wind through the court system, and it was actually considered a legitimate emergency in front of the federal bar. But, the fact of the matter is that, this type of process was routinely denied all through 2020 and 2022. And it's taken us years to get to this point. But we have, in our situation, we've constructed these scorecards that show that they have no control over the voter registration system. They're not accurate. People are voting that are not eligible, that they aren't even bothering to reconcile the number of votes to the number of voters. How do we get 338,000 votes in the system with no recorded voter? And then you have machines being used everywhere that are not certified according to FSMA requirements.
Well, how do you
much
have
less the requirements of HAVA.
how do you have more voters in Fulton County than you have citizens of Fulton County? There's a
It's
little
because they
factoid
don't
for
care
you.
about the law. Simply that, and we're going to make them care about the law. That's what our lawsuits are directed at, forcing them to obey the law.
Well, I think you're on the right track. From my experience, courts are not willing to go back and tinker with an election once the results have been announced. Maybe they will show a willingness to get it fixed on the front end. And I think that is certainly a good strategy to pursue.
We are pursuing that strategy and then establishing standing after the election if they don't follow the law. So unlike the others, if you've gone into court and exhausted your remedies already and they've refused to follow the law, then you automatically have standing as a party after the election. So we'll file secondary suits in those states that have refused to follow the law. In 2024, we'll be filing directly after the election if they haven't changed their conduct.
So what do you think about those pesky little QR codes in Georgia? I don't know. Do other states use the QR codes? I don't trust the QR codes. Do you?
I don't trust anything that's not human readable and where people don't provide mechanisms for figuring out on the fly what the barcodes say. And by the way, the QR codes can just dereference to some other site, and so you don't even know what the other site says or does. And I don't know if you know it or not, but we were involved in the arrest of Eugene Yu, supporting the cyber forensic recovery in California. As far as I know, it's the only clearly legally valid cyber forensic recovery in the country in terms of an actual investigation under warrant. We had massive evidence of CCP penetration of part of our election infrastructure, and people say, "Well, it's just the election, management system," but it's not true. The system's interconnected to everything. And as a cybersecurity expert, I can tell you that when you have a bad actor inside your network, you don't trust any of your systems then. So it's not, it's simply such a mess that I'm not sure that there's anything short of, bringing in your passport or your birth certificate and proving that you're a U.S. citizen and maybe allowing people that don't have that documentation to do the purple thumbprint on the ballot. And then you got to make sure that you have only legitimate ballots in the system. And there's got to be some control mechanism that doesn't allow after the fact injection. It's perfectly doable from a technology perspective, but again, they don't care. They simply don't care to follow the rules. And somehow we've elevated, bureaucrats above the law. Well, that's not the way it's supposed to work. The bureaucrats are supposed to be enforcing the law. That's why we have a republic that we talk about being ordered under the rule of law.
100%.
Right? So we have to break it. If we don't break it this time, I don't know where we're headed.
In the few minutes we have remaining, what about the machines? And not only the machines, but the back end after the machines and the tabulating. Do you have any insight into these machines and the tabulating? And have we fixed anything? Is there reason?
No, we have not fixed anything, and the EAC doesn't show any indication that they're going to force anybody to fix anything. But the fact of the matter is there's no FSMA compliant process in place at all to make sure the machines are valid. You can look me up. I am the chairman of United Sovereign Americans, and we're not focused on machines, but I've worked extensively with the machine people, and the machines are not provably secure. It's just plainly not.
Well, they just lie so bad. They say the computers are not connected to the internet, yet there's overwhelming proof that the computers are connected to the
DHS system
internet.
itself is internet-based, or actually network-based. So I hate people that that will argue one thing when they clearly are lying on the other side. So they put it on a different network than what you call the internet, right? So that somehow is validating the concept of no internet connection. But in fact, the intent of the law is to prevent any any hacking of the system, and they connect it to systems that over which there is no control. So, the worst security breach to occur in the national defense infrastructure of our country ever was a monitoring system to prevent hacking. So it's insane that DHS, the Albert sensor, nonsense is in fact a illegal security breach of our election system.
Harry,
but somehow they think, go ahead.
No, just thank you so much. We're out of time. I really appreciate your stepping out of the meeting to join us. Did you want to finish that one thought, or?
No, I think it's okay. If people want to look up my mind-bending technology discussion, there was an article in the Gateway Pundit that quotes me quite in work that I did with David Clements.
And where do we find you on the web?
So United Sovereign Americans is at unite4freedom.com. So Unite for Freedom. The difference is that it's not the word for, it's the number for. So unite4freedom.com.
Very good. Harry Hari.
You can find a lot of our stuff there.
Harry Hari, Chairman of the United Sovereign America. Thank you for coming on, and we really appreciate your coming and telling us the truth today. And thank you for your work. Keep it up, and let's see if we can't have an honest, free, fair election in 2024. If we have that, I'm willing to accept the results. Without that, this country is in a world of trouble. You can.
So I call it a treaty between the people. We have a treaty, and it's based on fair, open, and honest elections, and they're violating the treaty.
100%, and they're not helping our union. They're not helping the greatest country on earth survive. And if we don't have that franchise, I fear for our future. You're listening to The Truth. I'm John Gordon. You can follow us every Saturday at high noon on The Truth here on the John Fredericks Media Network. You can also catch us on YouTube Live, Getter.com. Hit the live button, look for The Truth with John Gordon, and also on Rumble.com. If I could ask you just to do one small little favor that wouldn't take you but a moment, but would do a world of good for us, if you would just go onto those services wherever you watch, hit the subscribe button, like us if you do, and be sure to join us next Saturday for another edition of The Truth. I'm John Gordon. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next Saturday.
Bye-bye.